Steve.
So before, if Tom may have some updates as well, I just want to give you a couple updates, what we're having happen at the township and some changes that we're experiencing that are slightly affecting where we are. We're just making some minor modifications. Our accounts payable person resigned last month. And so Tom has had to kind of pick up some additional responsibilities. Not that Tom needed anything additional. So we've been working through that. What we've done is we've gone out and we've hired Dallas Data, who is our third party software provider. They also have in-house some accounting skills, understand how our software operates. And so we brought them in for the purpose of doing the regular accounting, it kind of accounts payable kind of things. Tom is going to pick up doing our payroll, and we're in the process of making some minor other modifications in the office on who's handling escrows and things like that. So that's kind of been our focus over the last 20 days after finding out that that person was leaving. In addition to that, Suzanne, who's our HR person, has decided to retire. We're very happy for Suzanne. That's a great move. However, that's also meant more work on the finance and trying to make sure that everything's in place. She's still here, but we're going through and making sure things are in line. The great news is that we've been able to go out and hire somebody who has HR experience. And that person is actually going to start next week. So there'll be a 2-week overlap between Suzanne and that person, just to kind of make sure that that person has a chance to get up to speed and do that. Our goal, obviously, that I think on the HR side and making sure that we continue to do payroll correctly and all of those kind of things, that will be pretty seamless on that side. The check process, we've already actually had one check run from the Board of Supervisors, and I think that went really pretty well. There was a few minor adjustments that we're going to need to make, but I think as a whole, that went well. We intend to allow that to go for about 6 months, with the idea that they'll do most of the work on their end. There'll be a little bit more work in the office from Tom and I, just kind of going through things, making sure things are updated. But this way, Tom will have been here then a full year, and then he can decide exactly what kind of assistance we really need in the office when we go out and hire that position back, versus going and hiring exactly what we have today. I know we need help with payroll, but according to our software company, there were some features of the system that we weren't using that might actually streamline that process. And so we're part of our compensation for them is helping us to get those implemented. And so it seemed to make sense to take a step back and do it that way to make sure that we were well covered and do it right. Tom and I may regret it for the next couple months, just trying to go through. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to come back and say we end up with a much better system in the township, and we'll do that. I mentioned escrows, which is a big thing that we still have. Actually, we're starting to kind of slow down on some of the escrows.
Is that for the permitting?
It's permitting. So we have escrows that are certain. You have escrows from developers, right? And so that part of it's kind of slowing down. There are still a fair number of escrows related to stormwater management. Okay. We have a lot of homeowners that are doing projects at their houses, which we're excited about. That's always a good thing. So a lot of those mean that they have to do stormwater management best practices on their property. And so there's an escrow piece that gets tied with that. Two pieces, one that goes for us to do ongoing inspections for 10 years. And then also during the process itself, the engineer goes out and does inspections. And because the engineer is a third party, they have to cover those costs for that so that it doesn't come out of the taxpayers' dollars. That's covered that way. So we're working on Mike, who's the one that left, that did accounts payable. He did a lot with escrows, and so we're gonna spread that out over a couple different staff. I think this board knows we hired somebody to work in the municipal authority as the operations director. And so that hire, she is picking up some of the financial responsibilities in the municipal authority. And one of the things that she'll pick up is doing escrows and taking care of those things. And she's more than capable. She's got good financial background. We're not trying to stick a round peg in a square hole. She'll do well on that.
It sounds like you got like 3 or 4 different people doing these escrows. You don't see any issue with.
Actually, there's really a good reason for some of that. You know, when we look at, you know, Tom and I all the time, we look at how the procedures are done in the office to make sure that there's segregation of duties.
Yeah.
And so
The internal
when we say
control.
3 or 4 people doing escrows, it really is a matter of somebody who might be collecting money isn't the person who's billing. You know, we just want to make
Yeah.
sure, because we have to replenish those escrows sometimes. And so you just want to make sure that you don't have the same person having control over the whole situation, because that's sometimes how fraud happens. And so we make sure that there's multiple people touching certain areas to make sure that it's more difficult for fraud to happen. You know, the last thing you want to be is that township that's in the paper because somebody has
Yeah.
taken money, you know, I mean,
Right.
there's several of our towns that have experienced that, that's what you don't want to have happen.
Okay.
And, you know, Tom and I have talked extensively with not having the person doing accounts payable piece
Yeah.
and what they were
Touching
doing.
funds, yeah.
I can't just give it to somebody else who is doing something. We had to think through
Yeah.
of what those steps were to make sure that we were protecting the township and protecting our process.
Okay, cool.
So we do a lot of that conversation just to make sure, you know, we're protecting the taxpayer. Like I said, the last thing I want to have happen under my watch or at any time going forward is, you know, somebody come back and say there's misappropriation or somebody was able to take funds from the township or bill behind the scenes or something like that.
Okey-dokey.
So we're pretty careful about who gets to do what in that way. The other thing that I would bring up to your attention, I think that there's been some requests from this board about whether or not the township has an amusement tax. We have actually found out there's actually an amusement tax on the books. Was one I didn't know was there. It was actually put in prior to 1997. It goes way back. And so we are looking at that and what the impact would be with some of the businesses in town as well as the PGA. There will be definitely, it will have an impact on the PGA. I say impacted,
Yeah.
there will be, we will get some revenues from that. But there's also some other businesses in town that we think are actually impacted because they are considered amusement businesses. And so once I understand how the ordinance is functioning, we're making a few minor changes to the ordinance to make sure that there's a few things, the way it's written is not very clear about collection. So we're going to clean that up. And once we get that in place, we will be then working with those businesses. I don't see it as being major dollars
Yeah, owners,
for the ongoing. It's probably going to be a pretty good dollar for the PGA.
When I was watching the finals, that was the thought that was going, I'm like, look at all those people.
Yeah, there's a,
And they didn't pay, $10 a ticket.
no. My understanding is most of the tickets are a little bit more expensive than that.
Yes.
So anyway, that's
Good.
that's where we are with all of those different things.
Maybe if Tom or you, Steve, to talk a little bit, realizing it's early in the revenue cycle as it relates to the real estate tax, but is there any
Yeah.
early indications as to?
Yeah,
what that's
well,
going?
here's what I'll tell you, you know, we are very fortunate as a community. I think for the last, probably the last 7 years, I think there was 1 year that we collected during the year, 97.5%, and then had to collect the rest. Typically, we're 98, 99% collection rate. And then, you know, there's a very small amount, and the last couple of years, we've been 99.3 or 0.4 percent collection rate. I think we turned over, was it 50,000?
50,000.
Yeah,
That's
to
it.
the county,
County.
as non-collected in 2024, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just telling you, you know, when I talk to other municipalities, they'd be happy to have that collection
Right,
rate.
right.
And so we're very fortunate on that. And so we're on target. I looked at the numbers. I think the bills went out a little later this year than they had in prior years. And I think that was just a matter of timing, from when we got the submission from the county and then when we sent it out. So, that I looked at the end of March run, and we were pretty much where I expected us to be.
Good.
The other revenues are pretty much kind of where I expected them to be. It's always hard that first quarter, because about half of what I won't say half of what we collect, but we have a certain amount of what we're collecting that's actually prior year. So Verizon and Comcast and some of those put their fourth quarter payments in. And so we collect them in like February, sometimes early March. And all of that actually has to
Pushed
be
back.
booked back to the prior year, because that's when it was really earned. That's when we really got it. And so Tom's been working on all of that and doing all of that. It's the first quarter is always it's heavy real estate tax. That's where most of the funding comes in the first quarter, and that's been the case. But we don't really start collecting LST tax and those kind of things until later in the year. So probably April and May will be when we really start seeing what is this year going to be like.
Right, yeah, it's still too early to indicate.
Yeah.
that we're on track. This is the trend we're seeing, right?
What I will say is I watch real estate just kind of as a side, just to kind of see where we are, what's being listed and those
Yeah.
kind of things. We have a fair amount of listings. It seems like closings are happening pretty regularly still. I think it's still behind what we experienced in prior years. And I say prior years, I'm not counting 2024 when I say that. I'm talking 23 and before. But again, we don't have that number of new homes being added. It's more of just turnover. I think we're going to see that where we are now is probably our new norm,
Yeah.
without new home stock being added. But that's, you know, it's always a little sluggish in January and February. People that's not their move months, you know, but it picks up March, April, May. People really start listing their homes. A lot of people do moves during the summer so that they can be where they want to be for the next school year. Or those who are retiring, you know, they really don't care when, but you know, it's not quite the same. It usually happens later in the year. You know, if I watch the cycle, so I'm not concerned about that yet. We'll take a look at it. Spending wise.
Yeah, I was thinking,
You-
there was a blurb in the township website about the police and the police contract.
Yeah, so I mean, the police contract was, you know, a big nut this last year. In order to be competitive with the communities around us, the board made the decision to do some pretty significant increases for the police. And, you know, I think that's important if we're going to maintain our police force, the quality that we want it to be. And so, you know, I think there was a pretty good size base that was given, like a base adjustment. And that happens for the first 3 years of the contract, trying to keep up with Joneses, so to speak, you know, with those municipalities around us. It's really hard. We're competing against some municipalities that pay their police incredibly well.
Yeah.
You know, there's a couple municipalities here that are starting, you know, well over $100,000 for an officer.
For
when you-
base.
For base. And so we're trying to compete with that and still be drawing in the level and quality of officer that we want. And so, and fortunately, we've been able to do that. So we've done that. So the police contract was a big piece, and we've been working through that. The second piece that I would tell you is we have been actively working at spending down and finishing off spending down the ARPA funds. That
Yeah.
all needs to be done.
Right.
And we have really had some really great projects that I think are going to make a big difference. We did a project over behind Water's Edge. If you know where that is, off of Earl's Lane,
Mhm.
there's a community, it's a small HOA community called Water's Edge.
Yeah.
We had water coming out of our storm sewers from the cul-de-sacs off of Green Country that was actually coming down and causing problems in that area. We've gone through and put in a new drainage system that actually moves the water onto township property, a little bit down from where they are. And so we've done that. That project completed, I think, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. There's minor things that have to be done on that. If you haven't seen it, it's probably worth a little trip over to what's considered Upper St. Albans, or for those who don't know where that is, that's the Lewis Road, Kelly Drive, kind of section off of 252, below Goshen Road, but before you were to get to the stream or that goes through the Fox's Run. That area there, we're doing a very large project. We're putting in some new storm sewer and some holding area there underneath the ground. And those pipes are 36 inches. I mean, they're big pipes. And so there's probably a picture out there of Leonard with the Cub Scouts and they're all leaning over him, looking at the picture on his phone. And that's actually what he's showing them, is the stormwater pipe, talking to them about how the fact that the couple of them would actually fit inside it. It is that they're that big. And when we're done, all you're going to see is the road back restored, and nobody will even know what's underneath the ground there, but there will be a large amount of ability to collect additional stormwater and kind of slow the process down of how that's coming out from that area. And I know Larry lived in that area.
That's my question. What effort was made to tell the residents what that project is? My son lives on Lewis Road.
Uh-huh.
He asked me, what are they doing?
So my understanding was the engineer was out and was supposed to have notified at least the residents that were directly impacted. I don't know that.
I think it would, from a PR point of view, I saw Leonard's posting.
Yeah,
It was great, that's Leonard. But, the residents in that neighborhood are quite inconvenienced
yeah,
because they can't get through.
yeah.
The township's doing something great. Tell the folks, hey, this is happening, the street's gonna get repaved, and I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'd go pretty wide on that, because that intersection of Kelly and Lewis, that's a pass-through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something to consider.
Sure. But that's a big project that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
doing that I think is going to make significant differences in that neighborhood. We're going to be able to collect some water that we have not been able to collect in the past. We're going to be able to collect it sooner. And that's one of the big issues there. And we're hoping that it actually helps upstream as well. We're doing this big project downstream. We're hoping that it helps upstream as well. So And then, if you haven't seen, if you look up on the roof, we've got the new roof on the building. I think it looks pretty good. They've been back out yesterday doing some more, finishing touch-ups on that. That was a pretty big project. You know, I think that was close to $800,000 or a little over $800,000. And then, right behind us, the turf field. I know some people have asked why we spent so much money on that. That's been about $655,000 to do that turf field, put up new fencing. I will say this, a couple things that we purposely did on that. One is under that turf field is a huge drainage system. And so they've actually, part of what they did is they've strengthened that. They've added some drainage for what's there. And so that was a big part of that project. Had we gone back to putting in a grass field or just a normal field, as you know, as some people have called it, we would have lost that ability, that what we have underneath there, the way that drainage works, because the way the turf field works, there's actually, if you pull back a piece of that, there's actually all holes in that. So all the water drains through, drains down. So it's actually does a way better job than if we had put grass back there in collecting water. And those of you who have been here any length of time, you might remember that I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago now that we had maybe longer than that. We had a storm come through that actually lifted the field. The water was so significant, it actually lifted the field, caused it to buckle. That's some of the things we hopefully have addressed. But what I'm even more proud of with this new field is the board has allowed us to take the direction where we have made it even more multi-purpose. It was pretty much a baseball field before. There was a Cronum, and I don't know much about Cronum, but it's not a big sport. I guess it was a big sport here for a little period of time. But now we have a pretty good sized soccer field that's a part of that field, and we have a softball field. And so we're going to have an opportunity to have that be able to use in multiple ways. It's really, I think, going to be a real valued piece in the asset, as an asset at the township. It was always used a lot before. I could see now it being used completely, other than maybe when there's 6 inches of snow on it be used. Although I have seen people out there with shovels shoveling off the snow on the line so that they could play soccer. So
Well, whoever runs that, one of the things they may want to think about, I've seen these stories recently about the flag football,
oh yeah,
especially the gals, and how that has just zoomed in terms of popularity. So if we could get in on that, I think that would be very good. Yeah, really
yeah.
big,
So
really big.
So I think most of you know, but in case you don't, in case folks at home don't know, we go together with Marple Township to do recreation. We have the Marple Newtown Leisure Services.
Yeah.
And we support that. And our field back here, that particular field, we allow Marple Newtown Services to be the leisure services to be the one that determines who uses that field and when, and manages that.
Yeah.
And they're really good at that. I have to tell you, they make sure that the field is, well used. There's different groups that come in, but they go through them. And that way we know it gets used and is taken care of well.
Right. Whisper in their ear.
Yeah, I'll do that. Rich, I'm sure is well aware. He's very, I have to say, I think he's a really excellent recreation person for both communities. He's very good.
Assuming, Steve, just to finish one other, and I'll let Tom go. Nothing else major in terms of any new surprise projects, anything on the radar that you can talk to?
Well, I think that I don't think it's a surprise project. The board Monday night listened to 2 presentations for our new consultant for our comp plan and strategic plan.
Oh, okay.
I'm very excited. I think no matter who gets chosen, we'll probably end up with a really great product. We have a chance to really have a great product either way. And so that decision will be made at the next board meeting. And then probably by middle of May, we're going to be kicking off and getting started, getting that first kind of feet wet over there, understanding that summer comes and that always slows up the process because we have a lot of folks in town who travel and go away, and that's all great.
And what is that for?
The strategic planning comp plan?
Oh,
Yeah, so
I'm sorry.
the comp plan has to be done every 10 years. Our last comp plan was adopted in the fall of 2026. And so this year, or this time, I suggested that when we went to do it, that we would update our strategic plan at the same time. Our strategic plan is about 5 years old right now. And so, and I asked that the strategic plan be done in 4, 3, and 3-year segments. The comp plan's a 10-year segment. And so we would do the first 4 years of the strategic plan, setting out how we're going to move forward, our direction, or in that piece, then come back and do a 3-year evaluation. And then how we're going to move forward over that period of time, and then to do another 3-year evaluation. I can tell you the history of comp plans in many municipalities is they get done and they get put on the shelf and they're hardly ever looked at again. We've actually done a pretty good job over the last 10 years of keeping ours out front. But
Well, if you're
I-
gonna pay the money, you might as well.
yeah, if you're gonna do it, we might as well make them be a document. And so the idea is that both of these documents would be living and that you're spending, you're gonna have 4 years worth of work to do when you first cut out. And that last year, while you're kind of working on it, you're planning your next 3 years. And then the same idea, so that you're always kind of in that plan mode so that you'll be ready. That's the plan.
All right.
I could elaborate, but Steven did such a great job. Just to highlight some financial pieces. Yes, the first through Fed, because the real estate tax bill, our largest revenue chunk, went out in February. We didn't obviously collect it less than, I mean, it's what I deemed an insignificant amount, but dollars to about 30 grand. That's what we collected on our over $7 million of budget information. March has been dramatically sizable, we'll just say. Just looking at the cash flow, even though we did, as Steven referenced, we did receive from a cash flow standpoint, the fourth quarter of the items like the Comcast and Verizon commissions, which are substantial, helped us along. The escrow activity for both the township and the municipal authority. It's there's a lot of opportunity there, and along with the accounts payable process, the payroll process, we have been able to focus on redoing the systems that we do. Yes.
So on this escrow money,
Yes.
how long do you have that?
Well, it depends on the type. There are, as Steve mentioned, there's stormwater. Stormwater is the one we normally have. Stormwater escrows normally we have the longest because there's an operations and maintenance requirement to keep it for a period of time.
Like
10 years.
10 years?
10 years.
Wow.
Yes.
So-
Yeah.
And that's set up by our code, but it's also set up by state code. So it's set in place so that it forces the municipality to do inspections of the stormwater maintenance for a period of time. And that's the reason. And so the homeowner or the property owner is paying for those inspections going forward. And so that's the idea, is that we make sure that it's being maintained, being taken care of, and it's doing, stormwater management only is as effective as if it's being maintained.
Yeah.
If
Is
it
it
becomes
working?
non-maintained and
Yeah.
it it's, you know, we had one up the street here that got overgrown and it was washing out and was actually went on a heavy rain. The corner of Campus Boulevard and Bishop Hollow would actually have water, you know, 6 to 8 inches high, which made it really difficult for people to drive through. And so that's the purpose of that. And that's why we have it for so long.
So if you're sitting there with that money, how do you invest that? You've got that sitting there for 10 years.
Yeah. So
Do you invest that differently than you do?
well, we
money
can, but
shorter
we're limited in how we can invest money anyhow. The state law for municipalities, you know, like you and I typically think about how we invest money to get the best return on that investment. In order for us to get the best return for that, there's some dollars that we can put into like Pliget and things like that. We could do some CDs, but we can't, we have to do what are considered collateralized investments.
Yeah.
And so you don't get the same kind of return, you don't quite get the same return on it that you and I would get if we were
Right.
taking a little bit more risk. We're not we can't go invest that in the stock market or something like that you might get.
Realizing you got 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we're very fortunate. Our bank, has been giving us a pretty good return, through all of this, currently. So we have some monies in CDs and we have some monies that we're investing that way. But right now, just letting it sit at the bank is actually because of the way for government money, they kind of know it sits there. They've given us a pretty good rate of return.
Steve, my wheel just turned with that. Scott. And I realize this is a big like, whoa. Has any consideration been given as to whether or not our banking relationship possibly, could we do better with another organization? And when was the last time we looked at that as a township?
I don't know the last time, we haven't looked at it since I've been here in regards to changing the local bank. We've had a couple banks come in and ask to be our bank.
Yeah.
But they weren't local in regards to, they didn't have a branch here in town.
Community, yeah.
And and I know, it's like, how can you have a bank that doesn't have a
Yeah.
branch in town?
You
You know,
Wait.
I didn't know there was one, right?
Right.
But I've had a couple come approach us, you know, and because we're still making deposits that we go to the bank, it's,
Yikes.
I don't want to, I haven't
Yeah.
wanted to go the other direction
Electronic.
where
Yeah.
we, well, or, I mean, the problem is you get cash, right? And so that cash
I
has to
see,
be
okay.
made some way.
Yeah,
If
you
it
gotta
was
handle
all,
cash.
if it was all check, and I'll be
Yeah,
honest with
check
you, I
and
think the
credit.
last 3 days have been all checks.
Mhm.
And it would have been easy. We could have done that
Check and
electronically.
Credit cards is one thing.
Yeah,
Cash
it's-
is another.
Cash is another. And we don't get a ton, I mean, and I want to say this real clearly, so don't let anybody get excited.
Right.
We're not sitting here with a lot of cash.
The bank guys aren't
Give me
listening.
Yeah, right. Anybody that's listening, we're not sitting here with a lot of cash. We just don't. That's not normal. Occasionally we'll get some, but you got to figure out how to do it. You got to figure out how to make that deposit. And we could keep just a local bank for that purpose. But
Because we've had a lot of large banks. move
But
in
TD,
here.
TD Bank is who we're with. TD Bank has focused on local government.
Yeah.
They have a whole section
Yeah.
that's devoted to municipal government. And then we work with Pliget, who is the state
Yeah.
level
I'm
of
familiar with
it
that,
for,
the library.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know that I could beat what Pliget does for us
I
on
was
a
just
normal
thinking
basis.
Citizens and Phillies tickets, you know.
Yeah, well,
Right.
you know, and.
I'm
Sorry.
teasing.
But you
teasing.
say all that and, you know, they do offer those kind of things and we don't take any of that.
Understand.
You know, first of all, you would have to disclose it.
I
and-
know.
And
It's not
secondly,
worth it.
it's not worth it. I mean,
Yeah.
I barely take what they bring at Christmas time that we put out, you know, I mean, it's that kind of thing, but we're very careful on those kind of things. I get invited to all
Yeah, I'm
kinds
sure.
of
Oh, I'm sure.
participation things. And I've been told I can do it as long as I disclose it. I just don't do it. I don't ever want it to be an issue. I don't want anybody to ever go back and say, you know, we have business because we do this for Steve Neese.
No, it's just, the
Right.
thought crossed my mind
Or
in
anybody
terms
else.
of just good governance. and
Yeah, we,
Like what we do with the auditors
Right.
yeah.
and have kind of like a
It would,
preview.
it probably wouldn't hurt us to look again, but I will say TD has been pretty aggressive with us and trying to make sure that they've taken good care of us.
Yeah, they are a good bank.
So, but, and they focus on it. I mean, like, they have a section that's devoted.
Right.
There are some banks that want nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Because,
Yes.
because of the collateralized issue,
Right.
that means that they can't,
It ties their hands.
it ties their hands and they don't want.
They don't do that.
Interesting.
Although it's ironic, yesterday I got, citizens reached out to me.
Yeah.
You talk about the
Citizens.
ballpark.
I didn't get a referral on
I
it.
was just letting you know. I don't know how that happened, Dan. I was right.
There's some Phillies tickets, huh? Okay.
I will tell you, in Phoenixville, I went out 3 times in the 10 years I was there.
Yeah, so
And-
you've done this drill. Yeah.
I've done the drill and I can tell you, most of the time, the differences are minor.
Yeah, it's not enough. yeah.
And, you know, you might get a few pennies more on your investment, but they also may be charging you more fees.
Yeah.
And so at the
Yeah.
time when you get done,
Yeah,
most of the
usually
time
the
it's pretty
def-
close.
The differentiator is the service, so they've got a group that
Yeah.
focuses on municipality.
But we're open, you know, if something comes along that makes sense, we'll be glad to do it.
What's the trip to Aruba?
It was true. There you go.
No.
No.
I have to tell you, I get pretty like careful about that because I know people assume that happens in local government.
Well, but I know.
And,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I
No,
want
no,
you
it
to
doesn't.
know,
Right.
we spent, you know, we as a team, we have a policy in place that we just don't do those things.
Not even close.
I'm
Exactly.
being facetious, but
But I know, but I just want to make sure that people that are listening understand that is something that we just don't do.
anything else
No.
you guys?
Come on.
Okay, great.
Steve hit on everything.
Perfect.
We are just to echo the fact that, we've taken the opportunity to take a step back with the,
Right,
with
process.
the processes.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure
That's
that
good.
when we move forward, we're not just hiring for the sake of hiring and then
Right.
find
Right.
ourselves
Falling in
somewhere
the
else.
same.
Focusing, yeah. So it's good to break, it's almost to break some things down to get them in the right spot. So, perfect.
All right, next item on the agenda is new business, and the one thing I thought about is, and it's so obvious, and we may have covered this before, is there anything that the supervisors would like this committee to do specifically or look at?
It's really hard for me to answer that question, without talking again specifically to the supervisors. I might make the recommendation
Right,
that,
just as a matter of courtesy, is there
you-
something that,
that maybe, you know, you and the vice chair reach out
Yeah,
to the
why not?
supervisors
Yeah.
and say, hey, what can we do? I think one of the things that we're going to need to do long-term is we have to look at, are there other revenue streams that we can explore? Yeah, and, you know,
can't call it a tax.
huh?
They can't call it a tax.
Well, but it may be a tax,
be a tax.
but my point being is this. If you're following anything with where the legislature is, there's some movement to do away with some property tax stuff here in Pennsylvania. We have a roughly $11 million budget. And 7 million of that is, roughly 7 million of that is property taxes. So if that stream goes away or is
It's limited.
drastically
Yeah.
reduced,
Yeah.
we need to figure out where we go. And I'm not saying there's not other
Yeah.
places, there are other places for us to go. But I think we need to see what that impact is on the community, you know, and we need to do those kind of studies.
Isn't also, I mean, if you look at, I think, was it 30% of the county budget comes from the federal government?
I don't know that answer. I would,
I mean, you know.
that
the
seems
way
a
they
little
appear,
high. I
but-
think that it's
Yeah.
state, but maybe it's, maybe it's federal
Yeah, you
funding.
might, I mean, there might be some serious changes in the way that not only the counties, but the states, et cetera, because and they're sitting there at the federal level going, what are we giving all this money away?
Yeah.
So, and especially the way it's been used,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, you
yeah,
know.
It's probably not a bad exercise to have something thought about, you know, and look.
What are
back.
the options, you
Yeah, What
know?
are the options?
And I
We're
gotta
faced
tell
with
you,
This 2 years from now, what are we gonna do?
and one of the challenges is that, I mean, if you look at the second-class township code, there's a fair number of limitations on what we can just go and charge for. And probably rightfully so, you know, I mean, it's like, yeah, there's a reason why they put those laws in place. And it was probably because somebody was doing something that was outside of what was healthy, you know, in a
Yeah, we can't do
community.
congestion pricing on 252.
Yeah. So, you know, it's those kind of things that, you know, that typically trigger the controls that get put in place. And it makes sense at the time. But then when you start looking and saying, if we want to take the emphasis off of property value, of property taxes, then you've got to figure out how to allow particularly local municipalities and counties to make that change. Because
To fund their government.
because that's, I mean, we're not unusual in that. I mean, it's more unusual to have a municipality that's not sitting at somewhere around 60 to 70% of their revenue comes from property taxes. You know, that's more unusual. I mean, at least 50 to 70 in that range, because unless they have an EIT tax that they put in that's pretty healthy, or they had a business privilege tax when they allowed
Yeah.
business privilege
Right, the
taxes.
grandfather, yeah.
But for those of us that were not, that didn't have those, you know, that's a real issue. And, you know, I mean, you look at Upper Marion, I think has no property tax.
Right,
You know, but they have a huge business privilege tax.
right.
And when you have a
The
mall
prize.
and you
Yeah.
have all of that, it works well.
Yeah.
But when COVID hit, they took a pretty heavy hit.
Right,
You know,
Right.
so where we were pretty consistent, you know,
Right.
with property tax, so there's ups and downs, like there's a lot that you have to look at when you look at those things.
All right, so Steve, then just to the point, maybe what we could do, I could reach out to Leonard.
Yeah, I would say have a conversation with a couple board
Right.
members and say, what is it that you'd like to see us doing for you?
Right, okay, so I will take on that initiative. Old business, our favorite thorn, but I guess with the recent developments on personnel and getting things under control, I don't know how much window of time, Tom, you would have that we could sit with you for 3, 4, 5 hours and put something together. I'm concerned about the trend issue. And I think communicating the trend, especially with the initiatives that are going on regarding strategic plan and the comp plan, that we get something out about directionally what the township's revenue sources have been and where they are currently.
Yeah, if I could interject, Tom's gonna tell you he'll do whatever you wanna do, and I'm gonna tell you he's not. And so-
I feel that.
Thank you.
So,
I will.
Tom has a few things that he needs to finish up before I would ask that he take on a project like that. And so, I would suggest that we have this conversation again, probably in the June timeframe.
Okay.
And then maybe over the summer, we look at that.
Because I'm thinking with what's gonna happen with the public comment period, I don't want it to come back, well, we didn't know.
Yeah, well, here's what I'll tell you. From the strategic plan piece, we're gonna be in front of the public for about a year. So, for the comp plan and strategic plan. I don't see that being done until September, October of 2026. So I think we have.
Right, so we have a little time.
I think we have a little bit of time. I know it's a rush because we want to get in front of this, but I think if we do it over the summer,
Okay,
we can do that and be prepared to get it out. And in the fall is when people will be
Yeah, they'll
really
be back
doing,
and engaged,
responding and
right.
doing, and I think that makes sense.
I don't believe there's anything else on old business. I will put it out. Is there any public comments that folks would like to come up? We've made you sit and wait. Sorry.
Hi, Louis Rosenthal, 20 Harrison Drive. So, a couple of things. Actually, maybe just one thing. I would suggest instead of, in addition to maybe asking the supervisors what they'd like this committee to do, the committee may want to actually engage in review of budget, maybe reinstate for the next budget cycle the type of open forums that the budget committee used to sponsor, which has not taken place. I have an opportunity of late to visit finance committees at townships across the county. And there are robust discussions with citizens and with township and borough officials about the state of affairs of the budget. And we haven't actually discussed any of that today, at least the budget committee hasn't. So I would just offer a suggestion that maybe you look at that. I was encouraged by the pursuit of amusement tax. I think expansion of revenue is going to be a challenge for us, I think, as everybody has sort of said. But I would embrace where the township is now and scrutinize where we are. So that's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much obliged, much really appreciated. Thank you, Louis. With that, I don't believe there's any other public comment, so we will adjourn the meeting.
Thanks. Have a good day.